Having a newborn baby or even a premature baby in ICU or NICU as it's called is nerve-wracking. Although there are many reasons for it, it really takes its toll on the parents and the extended family who have to live through those initial hours, days, sometimes it's weeks and months of uncertainty, fear, the stress, and eventually the exhaustion. So today's conversation is going to be very interesting with Michelle Ross, who's here to share her own experience and tell us more about what she does to support parents going through this. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining me.
Thank you, Sinta, for having me.
So tell us about your own experience. Where did this start for you?
So again, my name is Michelle, and my daughter's name is Brielle. I'll start by that. So Brielle was born 8 years ago in Toronto, Canada, and she was born at 27 weeks, which means she was very tiny. She was not even 2 pounds.
Yeah.
And yes, so she spent about 127 days in the NICU because she had to fight for her life pretty much from the time she was born. So that's really the base of my of what I turn into my purpose in life right now. I was in that space where I did not know what to do. I panicked. I did not know who to reach out to. Yes, there were other parents that were going through the same situation, but there was nobody that I could really look up to that had gone through that situation, come out on the other side, and could kind of walk me through what I should expect and things of that nature. So that's what I was looking for at that time, and that's what I realized was not necessarily available for parents at that time as well.
Mm. Wow, what an experience. So your daughter was born at about 6 months.
Right.
Tell us how were those first initial days? I know it's absolutely harrowing.
It is. So I had an emergency C-section,
Mm.
and as soon as she was, they pulled her out. She had that scream, loud scream.
Mm.
So the doctors thought, oh, okay, she's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with her. She's just tiny. But I didn't realize that with that noise that came out of her, it was really just that one scream, and then after that, she couldn't breathe anymore. She
Sure.
was unable to breathe herself because her heart had a murmur and did not close, so it wasn't pumping enough air for her to be able to breathe on her own.
Okay.
So she got taken right away. In the meantime, they were finishing up my surgery, and my blood pressure skyrocketed at that time. So I almost went into a cardiac arrest. So I had to be taken away. So I did not see Brielle about a couple of days later, where I woke up and I'm just like, okay, what's going on here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my husband at the time told me, well, you had your baby, and we're gonna go see her. And I think that the process of understanding, but I wasn't, I was only 27 weeks. How come I already had the baby? Like, I'm trying to process that, trying to
Mm.
understand what's happening around me. All of that it was just overwhelming. So I was numb, literally numb.
Mm.
Like, I was just like, okay, there's a baby. Okay. So I went and saw her for the first time. And all I could think is, my God, she's so tiny,
Mm. Mm.
right? And she's so tiny. And she's like, what does she have all these things on her face?
Yeah.
And, the doctors walk in and they're trying to explain to me what had happened. To be honest, I don't remember the exact word that they said. I don't remember. I just remember that they were telling me that, she needed to be here for a while in the NICU for a while because she wasn't able to breathe on her own. But they were hoping that, in the next few weeks, things will turn around and
Mm.
she'll be able to breathe on her own. But so my first reaction at the time was that I was just numb. I did not know how to process these emotions because I just there was just too much going on around me.
Mm. Mm. Sure.
Yeah.
So your husband at the time, I assume, was seeing the baby and aware of what was going on while you were out of it for the first few days?
Yes, so he will go to see the baby and he will come to see me. So I had to stay in the hospital for about a week because for my surgery. And when I left the hospital, so we were in the same hospital. My daughter was on the 13th floor. My daughter was on the 18th floor. I was on the 13th floor. So I was able, after 2 days, to go see her. But then when I was released to go home, I didn't understand how I can possibly leave my child in the hospital and go home. I lived at the time, I don't know how you do it in South Africa. Is it kilometers or miles? I can't remember.
But it's okay. You can talk in miles.
So it's kilometers here.
Mm.
So I lived about 85 kilometers away from the hospital.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, my husband at the time was like, okay, we can just drive and, come back and drive. Again,
Every
I
day.
couldn't process. Yes, it's too much. You're telling me that I had a baby soon, then I go see her and she has all these things, and you're telling me she can breathe on her own. And now you're telling me as a new mom, first time mom, that now I have to go home and I'm not bringing my baby.
Yeah.
Like, so the cries, the not understanding what's going on, the panic, the
Mm.
and obviously my husband and I, first time we going through all of this, so he doesn't know what to do, right? I don't know what to do. And all I could do is I spent a couple of days crying. That's all I could do, is just crying. And um at initially there was a little bit of disconnect because I couldn't see her in that position. I couldn't
Mm.
see her being so tiny. I couldn't see her in a machine. I couldn't see her fighting for her life. I could not see her desatting, which means that the oxygen, losing her oxygen, and then, nurses rushing in to try to stimulate her, to try to wake her up and things of that sort. It was just a lot of
Mm.
traumatic experience at that point
Yes.
and
Yeah.
at that time. So I lucky enough for us, we were approved for a Ronald McDonald House, which is a housing a subsidy that's usually close to hospitals, helping parents to be closer to the children. So,
Mm.
so we were approved. We did the driving for about 2 weeks, and then we were approved. So I moved to Ronald McDonald House, which was literally a 10 minutes walk to the hospital.
Yeah.
So that helped a little bit. But just going through the hospital, walking in there and seeing her in that state was just a lot. And the doctors were telling me, you need to take it easy. You need to be able to ensure that you're taking care of yourself first so that you can
Mm.
take care of her. But being a first mom, it was too much to like.
Mm.
I can't leave this baby here, go home and just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get my nails done and relax a little bit.
Yeah.
So that pressure and that stress ended up taking me back to the hospital because my scar for the C-section opened up again.
Oh no. Sure. Yeah.
Yes, so I had to go back, and I was there for 2 to 3 days, if I remember roughly. So those are 2 to 3 days where I can see her because
Yeah.
I was in a bed and I had my body had to rest.
Mm.
So that was the first traumatic month of her
Mm.
being in the NICU, basically, and with what happened with me and my
Wow.
emotions and my body and the stress that it took on the toll that it took on me.
Mm. It's quite overwhelming, so much happening. And then, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's very much a wait and see sort of situation, because you don't know from 1 hour to the next, one day to the next, what's going to happen. Is there going to be an improvement? And then everything is measured and counted out and weighed. And yeah.
Exactly. So you go in and you have days where, you have rounds. Doctors come in every day to look at it, every baby and every situation, and they talk to the parents, let them know what's going on with the child. You have a nurse that's assigned to your baby that day, for from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Mm.
And so you are in that room, and first as a parent, because of the emotion that's the toll that it's taking on you, you don't necessarily are open to ask questions because you're just trying to understand what's going on. But by not asking questions, you also don't know what's going on with your baby.
Yes.
Right? And that's where the advocacy come in, because if you don't know what's happening with your baby, you can't really speak for your child. Right? You're just going by everything that you're being fed on. And so I ended up reaching out to a social worker that was assigned to my child, and asking how can I be more involved, because at that point I started to feel like I needed to get ahead of things, so to speak. So I needed to know how do I start? I need to do something. I can't just sit here and just see this happening. I need to know what's going on. So the social worker, basically sat me down and said, if you want to ask questions, the team is here to help you. When the rounds come in, you ask the doctor questions. But what questions do I ask?
I was just going to say, how do you know what to ask?
Exactly, right? So the next time when the doctors were doing their rounds, when they came in the morning, the doctor's telling me, okay, Bria was born at 27. They do the same pitch, right? She was born 27 weeks, and now she's been here for 4 weeks. This is the progress that she's made. This is what she needs. So then at that time, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that she needs this medication because her heart murmur is still there. She still cannot breathe on her own. What does that mean? How long will she not be able to breathe on her own? What is that medication? What is the side effect of that medication? What should I expect after? What is the result? Like, how long would it take for me to see the result after you give that medication? So that's when I started now to ask these questions, right? And the doctors were, it's a medical team. So sometimes when they speak to you, they have all these words, that you're like, I didn't go to medical school. I have no idea what you just said.
Doesn't make any sense, eh?
Yes. So I had to actually ask my doctor to explain it to me as if he was explaining it to a third grader.
Yeah.
So that I could understand. And that's where my path of advocacy started with my daughter, because now they saw that I was interested in knowing. Now they knew that every time that they came in on a round to talk about my child, I will ask more questions. I will be more involved. I wanted to touch my child. I wanted to know what she likes, what she doesn't like, sitting by her side, reading her stories every day, making her listen to music, her to get to know my voice. Those are the things that I'm starting to see as the more time that I spent in the NICU with her, I started to understand what to get her to know her personality, what she liked and what she didn't like, which was very helpful because doctors change. You have multiple doctors, right? Nurses change, but you're the parent, you don't change.
That's true. Very true.
You
I'm
know
glad
what's
you
going on.
mentioned that, because it's so
Yes.
important that you are present there as much as possible, eh?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So now it was to a point where I could, when a new doctor will come in and, they get the notes from the previous doctor about what my daughter is doing, but I was able to also give them more insight because I'm like, I've been here for the past few days. I know what my daughter is going through and I know what she's been through. So I can give you more information than, you're looking at a chart.
And that makes perfect sense. Absolutely, because you have all the time to sit there and really be present and engaged. Michelle, tell me, right in the beginning, were you able to hold your daughter and physically touch her?
Yes. So when I went to see her the second day after she was born, they put her on me. That was the first time, but I couldn't hold her for too long because there was just too many wires.
Yes.
So I wasn't able to touch her after that for about a week. Yes, about a week. Yes. And to do skin to skin with her again. And after that, I was able to do it a little bit more often, depending on how she reacted to, that day.
That must have been very, very hard, because it's almost instinctive that we want to hold and touch our babies, eh? That must have been very difficult.
Absolutely. It is nerve-wracking. It is nerve-wracking, especially when you You know, I remember days where I'll come in and the nurse is like, oh, she had a great night. She was amazing. She didn't have any issues. And I'm like, okay, I can hold her, right? But because myself, I was going through all these emotions that I wasn't really taking care of, I will hold her. And all of a sudden, she's not reacting well
Yeah.
because she was
Okay.
feeding off of me. And she
Yes.
knew mom is
Mm.
not calm. Mom is panicking. She's holding me right
Mm.
now, but she's panicking. And all of a sudden, you know, her numbers will go down. And the nurse will be like,
Wow.
oh, I don't understand. She was fine. Like I didn't understand that until actually afterwards, when I started to realize, okay, wait a second. If I'm stressed and if I don't take care of myself, I can't go and hold her because
Mm.
every time I do that, she's not doing well. But if I tell
Mm.
myself and I force myself, because obviously as a parent, you're like, I'm going through this because in the midst of her going through all of that, I have administrative stuff that I have to, I mean, I have to leave work early because she was born early. Now I have to deal with my job and you
Mm.
know, the government because they need to know what's going on. And there's just so many administrative stuff that happens behind the scene
Mhm.
that you have
Mm.
to deal with. And that's stress on top of what you're seeing your
Also,
child
yeah.
go through.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, so that's how I learned that, you know, I needed to take the time for myself. And I realized that even just going for that walk, for that 15-minute walk, to just get some fresh
Mhm.
air outside, to be
Mm.
outside, not think about administrative stuff, not think about the hospital, but just do me and walk with
Yes.
me. I'll walk
Mm.
back in that room, I will hold her, and she'll be fine.
Wow. It's absolutely fascinating how sensitive they are to our state of mind, you know, and the energy that we give out.
Yes.
Fascinating, even that small.
Mhm.
So, tell me from a medical point of view, Michelle, did you have lots of difficult decisions to make in terms of her
So
treatment, or do the medical people take care of that? And to what degree were you involved in having to decide?
so I was involved a lot more the month after she was you know born because that's when
Mm-hmm.
again my advocacy and my voice was being heard.
Mm-hmm.
The decision that I had to make was deciding how long she would be on certain medication compared to
Mm-hmm.
compared to having surgery because there were two choices. Either she continues this medication, we're going to try it 4 times, or you can just have her have surgery. But in my
Mm-hmm.
heart, I wasn't ready to let her have surgery. I mean, she was so tiny, even though, you know, I mean, these hospitals, they do these surgeries almost every day. But me
Yeah.
as a parent, I was just not in the position. My inner self wasn't ready to give her that
Mm-hmm.
surgery. So that's a decision. That's one of the hardest decision I had to make. Um, and when the medication didn't work for the third round, I decided that she was going to have surgery. Now, does that it haunted me afterwards. I'm going to tell you why. It's because I don't know if I shared this, but when Bria came home, she wasn't meeting her milestones. And then we discovered that she had the brain injury that she had when she was born. She has cerebral palsy, so that means that she's not walking on her own. Even at
Okay.
8 years old right now, she needs canes and walkers and things of that
Mm-hmm.
sort. So was my decision back then a bad decision? Sometimes, you know, I wonder because, you know, they say so that if the child has had too much oxygen or was lacking so much oxygen, that also was a contributor to what had happened to her brain at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no study that tells you 100% that's what it is, right? So those are the things that you kind of have to accept and just live with, right? It's a decision that we made as her parents. Was that the consequence of us waiting? Was that the reason why she's here now today dealing with this? We don't know, but it
Mm.
crosses our mind, obviously.
Yeah. Sure, that must be quite challenging.
It is.
Yeah. And it's difficult. And I know we have to, as parents, make decisions in terms of the treatment all the time with the information that's available and with the little understanding that we have, especially if we're not medically trained ourselves. Very, very difficult. And
Mhm.
we hope and try our best to make the best decisions. And then we
Yes.
still have no control over how it turns out.
No, we don't.
Mm.
And that's a
Sure.
piece that I had to make to come to
Mm.
I had to come to peace with, right? It's
Mm.
as I was beating myself, I did not understand. Again, I did not know that until after she came home. So during the time that she was in the hospital, I was making the decision based on, like you say, what I knew and what I had researched on my own and what other doctors were saying. Those were my decisions were based on that, to give her the best that she could get at the time.
Yeah. It's a huge learning curve. Apart from having to deal with the trauma and the emotional stress of it, it's a huge learning curve because you suddenly have to get a crash course in anything that's relevant to your child's situation. Hey.
One thing I said when I got off, when she graduated from the NICU and she was coming home, one of the nurses told me, if you ever need a job in this hospital, you may want to come back.
Wow. Okay. So Michelle, tell us, how many days was she in the NICU?
127 days.
127 days. This is just so interesting. When we've had a loved one in ICU, in the NICU, we count the days. But for people who have not been in that situation, it's weird to think in terms of days, hey? Because we count in weeks or months at the most, hey? But
That's
every day
right.
counts. So tell us, after that, did she come straight home after that?
Yes, she came straight home. So the usual protocol is, because we lived 85 kilometers away from the hospital, is that when she gets better, the NICU where she was a higher level NICU. That means critical babies go there. So when they see that the baby's not really in critical condition anymore, they kind of wean you off to a lesser NICU that doesn't need, where she doesn't need that much
Yeah.
care, and a hospital that's hopefully closer to your home, so that the transition home will be easier. But I wasn't ready for that, so I had to fight again for her to, because she was getting, the hospital where she was born was the best in Toronto, and I just didn't want her to go to another one, and for me to deal with doctors and nurses and explain and everything. I had created a routine, I had created a team. I knew the doctors, I knew the nurses. I did not want to change that. So I fought for her, and thankfully she left that hospital straight home. So when everything was said and done and everything was good, then she transferred home after that.
And this brings us to what you actually help parents with now, is that transition. Am I right? Tell
Yes.
us, tell us how does that take place? That must be quite nerve-wracking also. How do you prepare at home, and how do you help parents to transition?
So the first thing I tell the parents are ready, that are about to transition, is they have to know their child's routine at the hospital. They have to be familiar with that, right? I always say that you can't be a visitor when your child is in the NICU, right? You're part of the care team. You have to know what's happening to your child, because that's very important. When you transition home, it's just going to be you and your baby. There's not
You
going to be a
take
medical
over.
team,
Yeah.
right? There's not going to be, and you're going to be the medical care team when your child is home. So you have to put in place things that prepare you to make that transition as easier as possible as you can. And that is knowledge, advocacy that you've done in the hospital, and knowing everything that you can know about your baby. When we transfer, hospitals usually will give us, they'll give you a booklet of, what to do when you get home. You need to do XYZ. Your baby needs to gain weight, and your next appointment to come to bring back your baby will be in a week or so, because they want to wait or make sure that, the baby is doing well. But the emotion part, the part where you come home, and if your baby's not sneezing, you panic, because you're like, oh, when I was in the hospital, I could just call the nurse and be like, nurse, she's, something's happening. But who are you going to call when you're home? So all of these things that you have to know in order to, when your baby's home, to understand that there's certain things that are going to be, you're going to have to just follow your mother's instinct. I tell that to my parents all the time. That instinct that God gave you is for a purpose, and you have to listen to it.
Yeah, and trust it.
and trust it.
Yeah.
You have to listen and to trust it, because that intuition is what's going to guide you with your child. And, you know, I've had some parents tell me, oh, but you know, sometimes I feel like I'm going to bother because I have to call my doctor all the time. And I say, call them. That's what they're here for.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
And, you know, and sometimes, yes, it's a bother, because if you're going to call your pediatrician, you know, 10 times in a week, at some point they're going to be like, okay, mommy, you need to calm down. Right. I
Yeah.
get that. But also, if you don't do it, then you're going to start feeling bad about yourself. And then you're going to start repressing your instincts, because you're going to say, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And you are extinguishing that
Yeah.
instinct
Yeah.
that you should be listening to.
Mm. Very true. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Don't do that. And our
Don't do
children
that.
rely on that from us as parents, I think, strongly,
Yes.
that we
Yes.
use our instinct when it comes to
Yes.
parenting.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes when and then when you take your, or, you know, for me, when I start seeing that my daughter wasn't, that transition home, and my daughter wasn't meeting certain milestones, because obviously they tell you, know, at certain months she is supposed to be able to do this and XYZ. And when I took her to the visit to the doctor, and I said, you know, her neck is popping on one side. I don't think that's normal. And they're like, well, no, you know, she was born premature,
Mm.
right? So it's going to take time for her to, my instinct was telling me, that's not it. There's
Mm.
something in there that you need to look at, right?
Mm.
So when I went there, that's what they told me. Then I called another doctor, a developmental doctor, and they're like, well, you know, it could be that she has torticollis, right? So maybe you need to start some therapy for her. And it's usually normal for premature baby to get into therapy, because they were born early, and, you know, they're just dealing with a lot of things. When I started that therapy with my daughter, and the therapist that was taking care of her was telling me what, you know, asking me what my routine was. So I explained everything. And she said, I don't think it's torticollis. And I looked at her and I said, you're right. I don't think it's torticollis. And she's the one who was able to help me get an MRI for my daughter to discover that she had a brain injury.
Yeah, sure. Talk about teamwork, hey?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So again, you know, it goes to that instinct, because had I followed that first doctor that told me, well, you know, she's premature,
give
it
it
would have
time.
taken longer time, right? And I wouldn't have been able to start the intervention as early as I started with her.
A mother's instinct, especially, is something that's very, very important and very strong. And I know many people, pediatricians and doctors who work with children specifically, who have told me they will listen to the mothers, because the mothers know, they have an instinctive feeling about things often. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful.
And like I tell my parents, though, please don't extinguish it, because
Mm.
I've always used mine, so I will speak for what I know, but I feel like if you extinguish it, it'll be hard to get it back. And you'll be, once you've repressed it so many times, then you won't know what's going on. And then if you continue to ignore that instinct, even for just not for your child, but for everything else around you, right?
Everything,
For your
yes.
family, for
Mm.
so it's a very important thing to
Vital.
nurture. Mhm.
Yeah. So, Michelle, can you give us an indication of what was your routine like coming home with your baby, in terms of How much sleep did you get? How many hours were you up and around? What were your rotations and things, taking care of it? I mean, taking over the care. What did your life look like at the time? You smiling? Was it hectic?
Well, let me tell you, for the first month, I did not sleep. I'm just going to be
Mm,
brutally honest. I did not sleep because just to go back a little bit. So a week prior to Bria coming home, she had had the surgery, right?
mhm.
So it was the first time for me after that surgery that she did not have anything on her face to breathe. She was breathing on
Yeah.
her own. So I only had that 1 week for me to get used to the fact that she didn't need anything to breathe
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So I'm coming home and now, my house, I sanitized my house like there was no tomorrow. A little bit of OCD there showing. I mean, it was spot clean. You could see the floor, you could eat on the floor. It was
Mm,
clean. But I did not have. I live in Canada, so it gets very cold in the winters. And she
mm,
came home in November, was starting of the winter. I did not have a humidifier.
mm-hmm.
So when she got home, she started becoming stuffy,
Mm,
like the second day.
sure.
And being stuffy, she could she was having problem breathing.
Mm,
PTSD right away. She
yeah.
can breathe. I need to call the doctor. We need to take her to the emergency room. All of these things are happening, I'm and when she's sleeping, I'm poking her because I'm making sure that she's sleeping, not,
Yeah.
doing something
Yeah.
else. So when I took her to the doctor, they told me, she's just stuffy, put a humidifier. She had a humidifier, but because I was dealing with my own trauma,
Mm,
I will sleep for 5 minutes. I'll wake up, make sure her chest is pumping, make sure she's
yeah.
still breathing.
Mm,
And the funny part, well, not so funny now, back then, was that when she was in the hospital, she used to sleep maybe 3, 4 hours straight and then wake up and eat. She gets
mm,
home, she's sleeping like 6, 7 hours straight.
yeah. And you're worried. You're not
And I'm
happy.
worried
That
because I'm like, you
yes.
can't be sleeping this
Yeah.
long, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm poking her. So now she's liking sleep and she's cranky. I'm
Mm,
liking sleep. I'm cranky.
mm,
My husband doesn't know what to do with the both of us
mm,
because it's like, you need to let her sleep, and then and when she's here, I'm like, you need to look after her and you need to make sure that she's breathing. So the transition was quite interesting, but I had to come to a point where I need to understand after talking again to the medical team that they let her go home because she was ready.
mm,
They let her go home because they do all these tests
mm,
before they allow the child to go home. I needed to come to agreement with that. I needed to understand that when they allowed her to come home, she was ready to come home.
yeah. Okay. Mm,
Mindset shifts, right? My mindset had to
mm,
shift a little bit to understand
mm,
that. And it took me about a month, like I say, about a month to understand that she's a baby. She's gonna cough, she's gonna sneeze. It's normal,
mm,
right?
mm,
And the work was more within myself than with Brielle. She
mm,
was doing great. I was the one who needed that work and that shift in mind. So to change my mindset and to understand that she is fine and that I needed to just calm down
yeah.
and make a routine with her at home now as I had seen in the
Mm,
hospital.
wow. Difficult. Lots of changes and shifts, like you mentioned. It's almost as if you're coming down from a hyper alert or hyper vigilant to a more normalized, or you need to create a new normal for yourselves at home, eh?
You need to create. So the thing is, usually when I talk to my client, it's depending on their state of mind at the time. I have parents who, their children spend 2 weeks in the NICU, so it wasn't as bad, right?
Mm,
And they are coming home, and the transition is not that difficult for them
mm,
because they get it. They're like, I was there for 2 weeks. I saw what the nurse did, but I also have parents who had the child a week in the NICU, but they have PTSD. They got
mm,
PTSD just from
mm,
seeing that child go through that because
mm,
they did not expect the child was born full-term baby, but then something happened that they had to go to the NICU.
Yeah.
So now that's also an unexpected thing because you don't know, and now your child is fighting for a week or so, and now you're coming home. But you as the parent have been traumatized for seeing that they had to revive your baby, they had to do all these things to your baby, and you have now to create that routine home. So it's again allowing yourself to understand that if that baby came home, the baby was ready to come home.
Yeah.
With the thin line understanding that you also have the instinct that when they come home, if something's not right, you have the right, this is your baby, you have the right to take it back to the hospital and ask more questions, right? Babies are priorities here in the emergency room. So once you bring a baby, you've been seen first, right?
Okay.
So those are, mind shift is really what I encourage my parents to have and to allow themselves to have, because if you don't have that, and if you're going to stay in that trauma space, it's going to be very hard for you to make that transition. And it's going to be not just for you, for your baby, but for your family, period.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm wondering how you make sure that you are not overprotective and over careful and, you know, all those things for the rest of your life with that child, because they're more fragile in the beginning. How did that develop for you? Because they do get stronger and they do get better and they do become independent, and we need to just be with the program, eh?
Yes. You have to allow things to happen. And like I said, that those first 3 years for premature babies are very, very critical. For me, it was a lot of hospital because again, she was fragile, and with what we had discovered of her brain, and she was just sensitive to a lot of things. So it was a lot of hospital trips to be taking. But like you said, right, you have to come to a point where you have to understand that they also will grow out of that, and you cannot make them live in a bubble. If it was up to me, Bria would have been like, she would never go to school. I'll just keep her at home, right? Because that's my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I was afraid to let her discover the world and everything. The first time that I let her go to school, well, guess what? The first week she ended up in the hospital because of all the germs she's getting, because I had kept her in a bubble. I didn't allow her to have, I will see if she was crawling on the floor, I will make sure that I scrub that floor so much. And like, no, she cannot sneeze, she cannot smell anything. If I cooked, I had to make sure that my husband take her somewhere else so that she can smell the food that I'm cooking. Like all of these things that at the end of the day, for her to build her system, she needed to have these things to build her own system, right? And because I had put her in a bubble, I had put her away from everything. The first time she went to school, that first week, we ended up in the ICU, and she was admitted for a week because she had pneumonia. She had caught up with pneumonia. Her lungs had completely collapsed. Yeah.
Sure. How old was she then?
She was almost 3. Yeah, almost 3.
Sure. So, yeah, we want to protect them and, manage everything that they're exposed to. And at the same time, you need to expose them. It's hard. It's difficult to find a healthy balance between that. And then I'm sure when she did get ill and ended up back in hospital, you sit with that. You see, I knew this was going to happen. What
Exactly.
now? Yeah.
Yes. But again, it's also talking to doctors, right? Where I kept a lot of I kept in touch with the doctors that she had in the NICU, and I kept going back to them, and a lot of them were very happy to help, right? So, and they said, it's understandable. You have kept her in the bubble, so this is the first shock, but she's gonna be fine. You took the first step, you took her to the hospital, which was a good thing to do. They know what's going on now, they can fix it, but you cannot continue to keep her. As soon as she's discharged, as soon as the doctor says she's okay, take her back to school. And again, it was just my own trauma that I needed to deal with. Bria was back to school. Yes, she was catching things a little faster than other kids just because of her situation. But today she's a healthy 8-year-old. She's a social butterfly. And I could not even imagine keeping her. She fights with me to go to school because she's
Oh,
by
really?
herself, right? She's an only child, so she's like, no, I'm going to school to see my
Yeah.
friends.
Good. Isn't that wonderful? She's now 8 years old, you said, eh?
Yes, she's turning
Yeah.
9 in July. Yes.
Wow. Isn't that wonderful looking back at where you started, or where she started in the world, came into this world having to put up such a huge fight, and there she is, off going to school, having
Yeah,
friends and everything. It's amazing, eh?
it is amazing. And she's a fighter for everything. She does not let anything take her down. She
Mm-hmm.
has a very high tolerance for pain. If
Mm-hmm.
Bria tells me she's in pain, that means I know that if that pain was on me, I would have been crying hours ago.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
she has a very high tolerance. Even though her doctors understand she's if back in the days when she was going to, they're like, and she wasn't crying. She was going through this and she wasn't crying. Her level of tolerance is just beyond. So that's why I also I pay attention even now when
Mhm.
when she tells me that something's wrong, and I know something's really wrong.
Really, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's you 8 years down the line now. When does it get to a point where it's not so critical anymore? And I understand from what you said, it depends a lot on where you are and how much you deal with the traumatic experience that you've
Yeah.
had. And I suppose it's different for every child.
It's different for every child. That's right.
Yeah. Mm.
Every child have different conditions. Some child are fine as soon as they get out, they thrive and they never seen a
Mm.
hospital. Some children, take longer. It's a journey that's unpredictable, and you
Mm.
have to be able to adjust to that as a
Mm.
parent,
Yeah.
because no child is alike. And I cannot, my journey with Brielle obviously is different from everybody else that she was in
Mm.
the NICU with. I keep in touch with those parents. Their kids are, playing football today, they're doing all these things. But when we were in that position at that time, we didn't know, because each
Mm.
child is different. And whatever condition that they find on the child the outcome will also be different.
Yeah.
So I always tell my parents that, when God gave you that child, you knew that you were ready. So through the
Mhm.
highs and lows, he knows that you're ready. So you have to allow yourself to accept that,
Mm.
right? And not fall back in the um I'm not saying that you shouldn't be scared. That's everybody, you have to acknowledge
Yeah.
those feelings. Just don't
Mm.
stay there and don't leave there,
Mhm.
right? You have to
Yeah.
graduate and move on to doing better, to advocating for your child, to securing your child, because they need you. They will always need you. Apparently,
Yeah.
my mom still today, you know, she'll still be like, if I have a cold, you have a cold. I'm like, Mom, I'm over 40 years old. I'm okay. Right?
Yeah.
So it
Uh,
doesn't leave you.
yeah. What would we do without our moms, eh? Yeah.
Yes.
Michelle, how do you, I don't know, your child's only 8 years old now, but how do you teach your child to advocate for herself? How do you guide her through that process? Because as she grows older, she'll do
Yes,
and need to do more and more of that.
that's a good question. Um, so what I've taught Brielle is independence,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've taught her to be very much independent, but in that independence to voice what she feels.
Mm-hmm.
Do not just basically what I tell my parents to do not suppress anything. Whatever that's going on with you, you need to say it. Now, I also had to teach her how to explain her condition, because she goes to school and people are like, oh, why you're not able to walk like everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she has been, I've told her, what do you feel like, what do you remember? That was my first question when she was able to speak. I say, what do you remember about,
Mm-hmm.
that situation? She's like, Mommy, I remember being in the hospital. And I said, okay. And she said, and I see the scarf that I have on my side, so I know I had surgery. And I said, okay. And she's asked me, am I ever gonna walk one day? And I said, yes. The reason why I said yes is because all the studies and research that I've done and all the surgeries that she's done are giving her the hope that she is walking one
Mm-hmm.
day. We just have to
Okay.
continue with therapy because she crawled when she was 2. That's when
Mm-hmm.
she was crawling. And being able to just stand when she was basically 3. So
Mm-hmm.
everywhere that she's gone to school or everything, I've always had to have an assistant with her because she's not able to do things on her own. So it's just giving her the confidence every day, especially as a girl,
Mm-hmm.
right? As a girl, to give her the confidence every day that she can do things. She is able to do things. And give her the liberty to do that. Like sometimes as a mother, I have that instinct that if she wants to grab something and I see that she's going to fall, I want to go and catch
Yes.
her.
Mm.
But I had to sit back a little bit. I have to make her fall. As much as it hurts and breaks me, I
Mm.
have to make her fall so that she knows that she can get up again.
Yes. So important, eh? But hard to do.
But hard to do.
Yeah.
Right? So it's through these exercises that she's learned now that she's able to, she's learned now that she's, she knows what's going on with her. She knows, she will tell me, my toe is hurting, or, mommy at school today, I fell, or this kid, was laughing at me because I wasn't able to do such a thing. And we talk about these things.
Mm.
And she's also in therapy herself. I put her in therapy and counseling because I wanted her also to go through that process because I'm not, I'm a mom. So I always gonna have that protective thing. And,
Mm.
what? They told you that you can what? I want you
Yeah.
tell them that, XYZ, but obviously that's not what we want. So I also had to put her into counseling so that she can deal with certain things that she's and know how to
Mm.
express that part.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the process that I have with her, and it's an ongoing process, right? It's
Yeah.
not. I don't think it's gonna end anytime soon. I really want her to be in a position where she is not afraid of saying what's going on. She is not afraid of the condition that she is. She is not afraid of just being who she is because somebody
Mhm.
else is telling her that it's not. She doesn't fit in a box.
That's beautiful. It's so valuable for her as an individual. Yeah. Wow. I think it's wise to let her have some therapy or counseling also. And I agree with you. Um, I think it's valuable for parents to play the parenting role and have somebody else to do that guidance, because it just gives her a better support structure and a larger circle of people that she can rely on and trust also. So I think it's quite
Yeah.
valuable. Yeah.
And I also believe that it's gotten her, it got us even closer, that she's able to open up even more. Because as
Mm.
I said, she knows that I'm her mom and I'm very protective. So I know that certain times she will want to tell me something about something that happened at school, but she's scared because she's like, oh, mom's going to be scared for me and she's going to react a
Mm.
certain way. Um, I also had to learn to okay, calm down, right? Like,
Yeah.
but therapy helped with that because when
Mm.
she was going to therapy, her counselor's telling her, you can still go to mom, you understand, but you also have to tell mom, this is what happened at school, but I don't want you to be upset. I'm just telling you because I'm sharing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Wonderful. So, Michelle, can I ask, because of everybody who will be watching this video, how did this impact your marriage, your relationship with? I noticed you said that your husband at the time, because this
Mm.
must be something. This kind of experience must put a lot of strain on a relationship.
It sure does. It sure does. And again, when you don't know what to do with those feelings, when you don't know how to approach that trauma, it puts a
Mm.
toll on the marriage. Yes, we got divorced 3 years ago
Mm-hmm.
because we just came to a point where, our marriage could not sustain what had happened during that
Mm.
time, right? When Bria was born, we were married for 4 years. So for 4 years, we were alone. And then
Mm.
Bria comes along and she comes with, right? So
Mm.
dealing with that from just being the two of us, it just took a toll on our marriage, and it took a toll on the spaces that we were in at the time, not
Mm.
understanding each other, not giving ourselves the space to understand each other.
Mm.
And it just, our marriage didn't sustain it.
Yeah, and it's hardly possible when you have so much to deal with, eh? I can imagine,
Yeah.
because everything, at some point, everything has to revolve around your child and doing what's best for the child and keeping them safe and ensuring that they survive and all of that. So it's, and I know statistically, it's just a very, very big strain on relationships. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry you got divorced. And again, it highlights the importance of parents getting help with the traumatic experience that they're going through. And I don't know if all through the world there's much awareness of that and a lot of support for that. I have had a number of clients with children in the NICU, and apart from other parents who had gone through the same, we haven't come across much here and there, official organizations and individuals who literally offer that support.
Yeah. And I also obviously going through that experience, and that's one of the things that I emphasize a lot with my parents is that taking care of yourself, again, drains to your family and everything. When you carry, for my own experience, I know I wasn't open to therapy. I wasn't. It's just the truth, right? I wasn't open to therapy because my focus was that Brielle has to get better. I have to make sure that she's better. Okay. You're gonna wait. She's my priority.
Yes.
And then dealing with that, and then again, not having necessarily a plan on how to what to come next, so to speak, like not understanding, my surroundings, not understanding myself at that time. That's what took a toll, because a relationship is give and take, right? You got to be able to reciprocate what the other person is doing, and if you're not able to do that at some point, it just
And
breaks.
that is so tough, because a child who is in that situation actually needs a totally dedicated person who's going to give it everything and make them the priority. That's actually exactly what they need, but it's detrimental in other ways, eh?
Yeah, they need that. And to your point, they needed it. Then they need both parents to understand that, right? To understand that this child is now the priority. And again, both parents have to be in accordance that this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
It can't be the decision of one parent, assuming that the other parents will come on board.
True.
It has to be that conversation that said, okay, let's talk about this. This is what we're doing together. This is why, this is what's happening with our child. This is what we're doing. So the priority right now is this. And communication, they're always, it's such a cliche, right? When they say you have to communicate, go on your, you do have to communicate.
You do.
You cannot, you can't assume that the person understands what you're going through and vice versa. And and with having a child in the NICU, a child with special needs, the communication kind of gets thrown away. You just come to a point, or you think that because you've said it 2 times, that person understood, but you don't understand that for some people, it has to be a continuous thing, right? And you have to continue to communicate that. You just think, okay, I've said it 2 times. If they don't get it,
Yeah.
So
It's hard because it's so demanding. There's just not much time and energy or inclination left for anything else, I think. Taking care of a child who's in NICU or ICU, coming home after that, it's overwhelming. Taking over the responsibility of caring for your child. I mean, I have 2 children, and they were healthy and there was no medical care needed or anything major. And that was overwhelming and exhausting as it was, So, yeah, I relate to what you said. I remember I did the same with my babies. I would wake up in the middle of the night and go check if they're breathing. I was so afraid that they would stop breathing, And they were healthy. I had no reason to be afraid of it, but I was. It's especially being a first-time mother. There are lots of things we are scared of and afraid of. I cannot imagine what it must be like if you have it the way you had it, with so many challenges right from the start. It's absolutely incredible that you've come this far. and you're doing well, and your daughter's doing well. Wow, what an amazing story. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing that with us and everything that you've learned and experienced. I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, thank you, Sinta. It was very great having that conversation with you.
Can I ask you a last question? What have you got a golden nugget of advice that you can give to parents who find themselves in a similar situation?
Give yourself the grace. Give yourself grace.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself grace. We don't do that enough as parents.
Mm.
We're such in a flight and fight mode that we don't
Yes.
give ourselves the chance to just breathe and say, I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine. I'm doing the best that I can do at this moment right now. This is the best that I can do. This is the most that I can give at this moment right now. And it's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Grace. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Much appreciated and much gratitude to you. This has been a great conversation. I know it's going to inspire lots of people out there.
Well, thank you, Sinta. I don't know what time it is on your end, but thank you.